and as an MFT intern in private practice. And as an infant development specialist for the Santa Barbara County program, welcome every baby, and I'm sure she does. Autumn has always had a heart for women's issues and concerns and is excited to be sharing with us today. And we are so glad to have you, one of our own mamas, here to share. It's just awesome, so thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Well, I hope you enjoyed the Mommy Guilt Bingo. That came up on Facebook last year, and I remember, especially at that time, thinking, well, at least I'm winning at something. And then it came up again this year, and I thought, wow, I am still winning. We are winners, ladies. So I wanted to start with that, just kind of in a lighthearted way, as an introduction to our topic, which is the expectations of modern motherhood. And it's a topic that comes up a lot in conversation for me with women and mothers, and like Renee was saying, and a lot of the jobs I've had before, just this idea about the pressures we feel to be, to do, to perform in a certain way, which meets a standard of what constitutes an acceptable or stellar mothering. And it came up even at our MnMs dinner that we had at Terry's house back in November with some of the moms who made it there. And so it just has come up again and again, and I've thought a lot about it. I've been interested in it. I'll gravitate towards articles or books about the topic, and so I decided to see about putting a talk together for MnMs. But I do also want to just have a disclaimer out there. This is about the 6th iteration of this talk that I worked on. So this is not comprehensive. This is just kind of the tip of the iceberg, and hopefully it'll start a good conversation for us. So today I'm going to share with you a couple personal stories about my own experience of motherhood, my own experiences in responding to, nice little shelf I have here, my own experiences of responding to expectations I've felt with being a mom, and then I'm going to share some thoughts that I've gained along the way that will hopefully remind all of us about the need and importance to show ourselves more kindness and more grace as we just kind of figure out this motherhood role, or just experience. We might not be figuring it out. It might just be we're putting one foot in front of the other. Before I get into this, I do want to acknowledge just kind of where some of us might be this morning. I know the events of the past 3 months in our community have left a lot of us in survival mode, and I am still in survival mode. We were evacuated for a total of 5 weeks, and it was just really crazy. And I won't go through all the stuff that we've been through. Bless my table's hearts. They know what I've been through in the last couple months. But I just want to acknowledge that for some of us, especially in times of crisis and stress, like, we're just getting by. We're just getting through. And I want to just kind of acknowledge that. I know some of you might be experiencing your own crisis, or you know people who are going through really hard times, and even just living in our community for the last 3 months, I think we've all been impacted by ways known and unknown. And so when I came back to the topic to kind of work on it a couple weeks ago, it almost felt like a luxury. Like, I can think about this topic that is non-urgent, that is not dealing with things like evacuation and survival. And so I kept kind of being paused a bit. Like, is this the right topic? Should I really be talking about this now? Should I be talking more about how we live in crisis and thrive or survive in crisis? And I thought about kind of these two topics, the current stress that a lot of us are experiencing, our communities experiencing, and the topic of expectations for modern motherhood. And a connection point I found between them was really a question, which is, how do we deal with situations and with life when things don't go the way we planned or expected? And I think there are times and events of acute crisis that really catch us off guard and require us to respond quickly. And then I think there can be whole seasons or periods of life that turn out to be very different than the way we expected or planned. And the stressors and trauma that many of us have experienced in the last 3 months really broke into our expectations and anticipation of how life was. And what felt like something we could really count on and depend on just collapsed for many of us. And that has been true for me in some ways. And separately, the period of motherhood, especially early motherhood, I have a 5-year-old son, brought its own storm in my life that stayed for years and required me to look at the ways that I handle life when things don't go the way I planned. And both experiences have reminded me of the need to extend grace and kindness to myself and to lean into the grace and rest that Christ offers us. So I'm here as someone in the thick of it, not as someone with answers, but as someone who is really in the middle of it and will soon be back in the middle of it again. So a lot of what I'll be telling you, I'm trying to remind myself as well. So I want to start with a story about my kind of entry into motherhood. So I had a thought the other day that I'm a 5-year-old mother. I'm still new at this. I'm still young in this role. So I still have tantrums from time to time. And motherhood has never fit me very well. It's never been a role that I've felt like I settled into, or I found a good holding. And for some of my friends, motherhood has been that role, that place that brought purpose and meaning, and it has been that for them, and it has seemed to really fit them like a glove. And for me, motherhood has always felt like I'm wearing a dress about 2 sizes too small. So it feels sometimes uncomfortable, confining, unflattering, and one where it's impossible to hide my flaws and wobbly bits from others and myself. And it's really been only in the last year, I think, where I've finally been able to settle a bit more into that role. And again, my son is 5. But I think what happened for me is that parenting took my view of myself, a very kind of shiny, therapized, self-actualized, educated notion of myself, and just kind of peeled back a few layers and exposed me to parts of myself that were ugly and insecure and unhinged at times, and parts that I preferred to just leave unpeeled, really. And I remember at the beginning just thinking like, who am I? Who is this person coming out? Who is this Mother Autumn? And what happened to the old Autumn? Like, she was fun, she was laid back, she was, she was calm. And thinking like, where did she go? Wondering like, where did all this rage come from, first of all? Like, especially in the first year, like, why am I angry all the time? And how did I go from a fairly confident person to someone who second guesses herself all the time? I mean, it felt like any decision just brought me to a place of like, well, I don't know, and I need to research that, and I need to figure that out, and I just felt like I was second guessing myself a lot. Oh, and who is this person yelling at my child? Oh, right, that's me. That's me yelling at my child. Where did she come from? So I think part of the issue for me with motherhood and with finding kind of my footing is it was so hard because of the work I realized I had to do on myself and what that required of me. And for me, no other endeavor had really pushed me to that point. Marriage hadn't done that for me. No job had done that for me. No therapist I ever saw came close to kind of exposing that shadow side in me. And I've thought about, in some way, you know, I suppose on paper I should have made a really great mom. I have, like Renee said, I have my bachelor's in psychology with an emphasis in child development. I have my master's from a seminary of all places in marriage and family therapy. I studied attachment theory when I was there quite a bit. I taught human growth and development at APU for 4 years. I worked as an infant development specialist for Welcome Every Baby, where I became a professional at helping families welcome in a new baby, helping mamas take care of themselves. You know, I was a professional at this, you know. And but all this experience I gained before I became a mother myself. But then I did have my son Elias in 2012 after I'd experienced a difficult miscarriage. And while I was prepared for the possibility of experiencing postpartum distress, my own experience of it was severe and quite challenging. And from the very beginning, my hopes and expectations about motherhood were really broken into by this persistent cloud that took away the anticipated joy of what being a mother would be like. But at the same time, my experience of postpartum distress required me to change my expectations for success in motherhood. And it required me to meet myself where I truly was, not where I wished I was. So changing what success looked like looked closer to, yay, he's 6 months old and I haven't harmed my baby and I haven't harmed myself. Well done. When my son turned 1, I remember just thinking like having this image of us just kind of crawling to this finish line of like, we made it and he's alive and we're still married even if we don't like each other very much, but we're here, like, yay us. I'm getting applause in the back. So I want to talk a little bit about expectations, and again, one of the iterations of this talk was a little more, I suppose, academic, where I go into some of the demographic changes and technological shifts that have happened in the last generation that I think contribute to why it might feel different for this generation of mothers. I'm not going to go into that right now, but I did want to share just a couple things that give kind of a snapshot for what I'm talking about expectations. So on your table you have a little We have a bunch of little half sheets. One of them has a list of quotes, because I like quotes. So feel free to take it home. This I found on Facebook last year, which I just thought was hilarious and kind of combined kind of where we are today. So how to parent in 2017. And this was written by a woman, Bunmi Ladatan. I know I'm butchering her name, but here it goes. So how to parent in 2017 or 18. Make sure your children's academic, emotional, psychological, mental, spiritual, physical, nutritional, and social needs are met while being careful not to overstimulate, understimulate, improperly medicate, helicopter, or neglect them in a screen-free, processed foods-free, GMO-free, negative energy-free, plastic-free, body-positive, socially conscious, egalitarian, but also authoritative, nurturing but fostering of independence, gentle but not overly permissive, pesticide-free, two-story, multilingual home, preferably in a cul-de-sac with a backyard, 1.5 siblings spaced at least 2 years apart for proper development, and don't forget the coconut oil. How to parent literally every generation before ours, feed them sometimes. And I really don't want to say, parenting before our generation was just so easy. But it just kind of brought out or exposed the absurdity when you put these all together, or the mommy bingo guilt of what expectations we do come up against, and how that looks. And then I also wanted to share a funny story about when I first started coming to MnMs. And it was in 2014, and I started coming with my oldest friend, Tara Rohde, said, come with me to this mom's group. We just moved to the area. I think we'd been here for about a year. And my son, so I wanted to come. I wanted to meet moms. I wanted to get a little more connected. And so at the time, my son was about 2. He wasn't sleeping through the night at all, so I was completely sleep deprived. And so getting up, getting him ready, getting myself ready, getting in the car, sitting in northbound traffic from CARP to come to Santa Barbara, to be here by 9, it just seemed like an enormous achievement. Like, I remember walking in the door just being like, where's my medal? Where's my blue ribbon? And I was handed a piece of quiche, which that really was a blue ribbon in itself. And then once I was here, my son didn't do well in childcare, so there was always tears, and it was always this just frantic place, not place, but place for me internally of just getting here. And then I felt like I walked in the room, and every woman I saw was just gorgeous and fit, and I knew the hot mess I was inside, and just felt like, what is going on here? And so I do also just want to pause, like, if that was you this morning, if you were the frantic mama just trying to get here and you either broke a sweat or there were tears involved, like, yay you for coming. Like, have yourself another piece of quiche. It really, you deserve it. But then I would come and I'd sit down and take notes with all the speakers. And by the end of the fall term, that semester or that term, I came home and just started writing all these take-home nuggets from the speakers from over the past 8 weeks. And it went something like this. Make sure to spend 10 minutes a day talking with your husband alone. Plan 1 date night per week. Plan 1 thing with your husband every month. Make sure to spend at least 15 minutes per day just by yourself doing something that is just for you. Make sure you have 5 girlfriends in your circle of trust. And if you don't, start recruiting. Be open to the way your husband parents. There might be a big mess waiting for you when it's your time to come back and parent, but don't judge. It's not wrong. It's just different. And my favorite, to maintain hormonal balance, stop eating most things except obscure oils, dehydrated cookies, which I still don't know what that means, matcha, kombucha, and Himalayan pink sea salt. And so the thing is, all of these speakers had really great things to say, although I'm still skeptical about these dehydrated cookies. I don't think it involves chocolate, so I'm a little worried about that. And I think if I would have heard them at a different place in my life, even now, maybe, I would have been able to take them all with a bit more of a bigger grain of salt. But at the time, I wrestled so much with wanting to implement these things in my life, and with and then feeling overwhelmed by them also. And at a time when I was struggling just to get out of the house, these nuggets of wisdom for self and family improvement emphasized the life I so desperately wanted but didn't have. So the things I wasn't doing, the ways in which my husband and I weren't connecting, the lack of friendships I had. And I realized later how I'd internalized these suggestions for living a more meaningful life, and I turned them into an unrealistic burden for myself. So I couldn't get my husband and I to have a 10-minute conversation every day because that wasn't where we were. We were in a place where we were slugging it out in marriage counseling, and I needed to say, yay us, that we're trying to get through the hard parts of marriage. But the bottom line for me is that I was not meeting myself where I was or where my family was, and instead I was really burdening all of us with this heavy yoke of expectations not based on the reality of where we were. So these 3 different vignettes or kind of parts of my life, the stress and crisis in the last 3 months, how I just had such a difficult time fitting into the role of motherhood, and these specific stories of expectations, each of them brought me to this junction where I had to acknowledge that I was trying so hard to live into the life I wanted. I was trying so hard to be that mom, that person, and it wasn't working. And the only way I was able to really get through was to meet myself where I was and not where I wished I was. So along the way, and I kind of, would gain some perspective here and there. So I want to kind of go into a place of talking about just some thoughts I've gained along the way. And my first encouragement to you, and this is kind of the punchline of the whole thing, is be kind to yourself. Really, all of you mamas are trying so hard. You are here. You are wanting to know what can you do to make it a better life for your kids, for your family. So really, I just encourage you, really be kind to yourself and make this little phrase, have it kind of go along with you no matter what decisions you're making, whether it's a parenting decision or you're making plans or trying to figure out anything from what's for dinner to where are we going to evacuate. Just really show yourself kindness. And Anne Lamott, in her book, Plan B, she has this to say about kindness. She says, I became more successful in my 40s, but that pales in comparison with the other gifts of my current decade. How kind to myself I have become. What a wonderful, tender wife I am to myself. What a loving companion. I run interference for myself when I am working, like a wife of a great artist would. No, I'm sorry, she can't come. She's working hard these days and needs a lot of downtime. I live by the truth that no is a complete sentence. I'm going to say that one again. I live by the truth that no is a complete sentence. I rest as a spiritual act. And just about that, that no is a complete sentence. I think as women particularly, we feel the need to give supporting evidence for our no. We are not on trial here. No can be no. And I think often in our really busy society, we also try to maximize our time. So we can only say no if we have something else, because there's another obligation there, where no can be no because you're making the choice to say no. And I feel like that's something we need to learn a bit more, and I'll talk a little bit more about rest in a bit. Another point I think that is good to remember, I've heard it said, to do what you can, where you are, and with what you have. I think so often we feel the need to add on, or we need, or we don't have, and it's to make, to get done whatever it is. But so often, like, if we can just kind of just acknowledge what we have, where we are. But I like this phrase because it also acknowledges our limitations, and it sets boundaries around what is good enough. And just quickly, I want to say a word about good enough. When I was in grad school, I remember learning about this child psychiatrist. His name is D.W. Winnicott, and he coined the term good enough mother, after some research he did in the 1950s and 60s, where he observed thousands of mothers and infants together. And he was looking to see, just observing how they interacted, and in a very simplified version of his findings, it showed that mothers who were kind of quote unquote good enough, those who responded but not always, those who allowed for tolerable frustration and disappointment in their babies, their children, helped to develop resiliency in their children. And actually, in all of his research, he found that being a good enough mother actually allowed for the best outcomes for children, and found that mothers who, these are pretty black and white terms, but the perfect mother who responded almost every single time, and he did longitudinal studies on these children, and found that that the outcomes for these children later on, that the perfect mother and the neglectful mother actually ended up having more, their children had more similar outcomes. But the good enough mother, and I know Andrea Gurney talks a lot about this too, of allowing for kind of tolerable frustration, developing grit and resiliency in your children. But I remember even in grad school when I was 24, 25, didn't know if I'd ever have kids, but thought, wow, like there is research to back, like you don't have to be so hard on yourself as a mom. Like it's the best outcome for your kids to not be responsive every time. And so I want to ask if we can start embracing being good enough. Being good enough. The other thing is that I want to mention is to give yourself permission to just get through. Give yourself permission to just get through. Sometimes we just need to get to the other side. And especially if you're experiencing, stress, especially from the last 3 months, it might be a time where you think, maybe this isn't the best time for grand New Year's resolutions or that 21-day cleanse or setting up some kind of self or family improvement plan. Like, this might be the time to just hunker down and just take it one day at a time. And when we are in crisis, we're looking for those things that are predictable, that we can hold on to. And it might be a routine or a place or a people or a certain food. And to give yourself grace to just get through to the other side. Glennon Doyle, at the beginning of the year, I saw a quote. She said, "There's nothing in nature that blooms all year long, so don't expect yourself to either." There's nothing in nature that blooms all year long, so don't expect yourself to either. And I can be a bit of a self-improvement junkie myself. So I'm always looking for, well, what is this teachable moment? Or, what should I be learning from this? And sometimes that'll happen, and sometimes you will have that teachable moment. And then sometimes it's okay to just be getting through. And the next one, and this is all kind of connected, is taking care of ourselves. So in kind of the trail from be kind to yourself, take care of yourselves. And taking care of ourselves as mothers, especially, I think is so important, and it is essential to taking care of our families. If we are living in a way that is not sustainable for our own health and well-being, we will not have what we need to give to our families, which is what I know so many of us are wanting. And it's the whole, put your own oxygen mask on first before you help someone else. Like, this should be a priority. And I know oftentimes moms are kind of at the bottom of the list of who gets priority and who's being taken care of. But it really is so important. And I would encourage you to include rest and downtime in your family's schedule and in your own schedule, to leave a margin for yourself. Again, we don't need to be maximizing our days and our weeks so that every hour is productive or accounted for. Like, leave some time for downtime, and that will mean saying no. It'll mean saying no to even fun and good things. But it also means you're saying yes to rest and repair and recovery. And determine what self-care or rest looks like for you. It might look different, and it might look different for you at different times of your life. So it could be meeting someone, meeting up with a friend. It could also mean staring at the wall for an hour, and that could be therapeutic in and of itself. Gail gave me this quote by Parker Palmer, and he writes, "Self-care is never a selfish act. It is simply good stewardship of the only gift I have, the gift I was put on this earth to offer to others." So, and I think that's really spot on. That because I think we can, often we can couple what we're feeling with the guilt of, well, if I prioritize myself, then I'm not prioritizing someone else or something else. But really, it is what we have to offer, and so I would encourage you to spend some time kind of thinking about that. So back to the story of when I was here in the fall of 2014. I remember coming home after the term and sitting down and writing about all this, and I remember I had two thoughts that came to my mind. And the first, I thought, there's something I want to tell to all these moms, not just at this group, but moms that I meet in general out there. And what I want to tell everyone, and partly because it's what I want and need to hear for myself, is you are all okay just the way you are. Exactly where your lives and your bodies and your marriages and your children are, even if all of that in the moment seems like it's not okay, it's okay. And again, I think I needed to hear that for myself. And the second thing I thought about as I was writing came through more of that still small voice. And I don't claim to be speaking for God in any way, but it just felt like God was impressing upon me what he was whispering really to all of us and what we need to hear. And it's in this tender invitation from him that he gives to us no matter what circumstances we're facing. If we're in acute crisis right now, or just trying to get through another day, Jesus gives us the invitation to come to me, all you who are weary and heavy burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your weary, anxious, and fearful souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. And I think in this, Jesus is giving us the gift of his rest in exchange for the heavy burden of expectations we experience. He's inviting us to come exactly as we are, to come as our real self and not our idealized self, and he will give us rest. About 3 years ago, Jen Hatmaker came to Santa Barbara and she talked about this passage. And she explained that in Jesus' time that there was a tradition where followers of certain rabbis had to adhere to a certain set of rules if they were going to follow that rabbi. And that set of rules was called a yoke. And so for Jesus' listeners, they knew that what he was offering was the opportunity to follow him without the crushing yoke of rules and expectations that were common in that day and that culture. And he is telling those who would follow him that his yoke is easy, it's not crushing, it's not impossible. So I just ask us, can we lean into that invitation to rest in Christ? Can we remind ourselves at times when we feel overwhelmed by expectations or crisis that we are given this invitation to rest? So I want to do a little rest moment for us if you would like to participate. So first, I invite you, if you would, to just close your eyes, to sit in a comfortable position, to unclench your hands, to let go of anything in them, either place them gently in your lap or just let them go limp beside you. To uncross your legs if that feels comfortable to you. To let your belly go. To notice if there's any tension anywhere in your body. And imagine sending kindness to that part. Now just release any tension you might be feeling in your forehead, your temples, your jaw. Unclench your teeth. Relax your neck. your shoulders. Breathe deeply through your nose to expand your chest and your belly. And then exhale. Yet let your legs go limp if you can. Wiggle your toes. Feel your feet supporting you both gently and firmly on the ground. Keep your eyes closed and take a deep breath in and let it out slowly. Come to me, all you who are weary and heavy burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. You may open your eyes when you're ready. Thank you.